Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Samach Tet 69 of Masechet Avodah Zarah as we come to the final week of Masechet Avodah Zarah. So God willing, this time next week we will be finishing. So Mazel Tov to each and every one of us. So we are last two words on Samachet Amud Bet. We had been discussing a mouse that fell into beer, and now we're talking about a mouse that fell into vinegar. So ibaylahu, again, last two words in Samachet Amud Bet, and so we turn to Samachet Samachet Amud Aleph. Nafal lego chala, if it fell into a bag of a container of vinegar. So, what's the halacha? So Rashi says, top Rashi on Samach Amud Aleph, Mi amrinan hachometz tamo kasher, ve'ein hasheretz mapigo l'teit bo tam. Do we say that the vinegar is so powerful that as a result, the mouse that falls into it, the creepy crawly thing, that falls into it is not going to give it any kind of taste. And this is based on these are based both on the comment. This is on the comments of Rav. Rav noted in his second I'm sorry, Rava noted, excuse me, in his second explanation of Rav at the very end of the day yesterday, where he says, the achbara b'shichra ashbuche mashbach, that somehow a mouse falling into the beer must enhance the flavor, and that's why Rav said that it was prohibited, meaning that he agrees that in fact no Saint Tam Lifgam is mutter, but a mouse is in beer is not a no Saint Tam Lifgam case. And so the question then becomes, well, what about if it fell into vinegar? Do we say the same thing, that it's not that it gives a benefit, or is the taste so powerful that it does not? Tosos offers a different interpretation. Instead of suggesting and basing on the stricture of saying that a mouse in beer is going to be a problem, he says, no, Rav's last statement, Rava's statement basically was in the end that it doesn't give a good taste, and his position is that it doesn't give a good taste, and therefore it should be a problem. And so as a result, he asks, the question is as follows, as we take a look in the first Tosos on Samach Teramid Aleph. Ibailu Nafal Chala. Again, the mouse now falls into the vinegar. Ve'im tomar ma'ishna mishar isurim kamo b'shikra. Meaning, why is it any different? Why should it be any different from the beer, where we say, according to this understanding, that if a mouse falls in, it's no zain tam lifgam, and therefore it's mutter. V'yesh lomar mishum dechala chazak ma'od, because vinegar is so strong. V'agav chorfe no zain tam l'shevach. And now, maybe, because of its strength, it can actually cause a positive taste. Kamo gabi as we saw when it came to the split beans, we saw that in fact there's if in certain conditions the vinegar can actually make things taste good. O dilma me'at min hasheretz. I'm sorry, ma'athu shevach hasheretz, meaning that a little bit of the that when you reduce the amount of the taste because of the strength of the vinegar, neged hamashka, opposite what's the liquid, is going to be a positive. The imkain ein lanu la'asor kol kach. And so, and that's why maybe, even though based on Tosos's understanding, where the mouse falling into the beer is a no Saint Tam Liv Gam and mutter, here we have to ask the question because maybe it's different. So that's why we need to ask the question. So again, according to Rashi, we're asking the question because a mouse in beer is positive, and therefore maybe a mouse in vinegar would also be positive. And according to Tozos, no, a mouse in beer is negative, and we're asking, well, even if a mouse in beer would be negative, maybe a mouse in vinegar could be positive. So those are two different ways to understand this question.
So how is it positive? It's positive that we're not, people are drinking beer. They're not drinking vinegar. Or we're using the vinegar for salad, or you're making the vinegar taste better, lessening the
Yes,
strength of the vinegar. And it's just the
correct.
vinegar that's being used in a salad for dressing, and it
That's
tastes
correct.
better. Is that
Exactly.
it?
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Whatever you're going to use the vinegar for, not obviously it's not to drink it raw, but whatever you're going to use it for, somehow by adding a slight taste of mouse, I'm again kind of repulsive, but the point is if you didn't know, you would actually say that, oh, that tastes better. So Amar le Rav Hillel. So what? How do we answer it? So Amar le Rav Hillel Rav Ashi. Rav Hillel says to Rav Ashi, Hava Uvda Be Rav Kahana. This happened in connection with Rav Kahana. For us, Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana said it was prohibited. Okay, so Amar le Rav Ashi says back, Hahu imartute imartat. That was a different case. As Rashi explains, what's the difference? Amartute imartat Lichattuche dakot ketanot, that the mouse had disintegrated into small, tiny pieces. The sheretz, and when it comes to a creepy crawly thing, like a mouse, isuro b'ka'adasha. You don't need an olive size amount for to swallow in order for it to be prohibited, even a bean sized amount. Ketumato, just like it creates tuma with that small amount. The chayshinan, and therefore when it got demolished, dilma boleach hatichot sheretz bahadichomitz. Now maybe it is sufficiently disintegrated that it's going to be incorporated into the vinegar. So what are we saying? The point is that because you're going to actually eat mouse, so that's why he prohibited it. So it's not that, in fact, if it conveys a taste, of course, it's important to remember that in connection with the conveying of the taste, we're assuming that you're removing the mamashut, that you're removing the substance of the things that's not kosher. So it's only the taste that is being conveyed, and that's the question that is being asked. And so as a result, no, Rav Hillel, that case of Rav Kahana did not, in fact, have anything to do with our question, and therefore it does not answer our question.
Listen,
Okay.
if the mouse is so degraded that it's unrecognizable, if it's mama shoot, okay, you can remove it. But in this case, how do you know there's even mouse in there?
No, so look, obviously you have to know that there's mouse in there, otherwise the Shiloh never comes up,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, if it's
So
so degraded, I mean, you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
even
you're not
know.
going to know. So obviously, we're dealing with a case where, again, the two cases are one, the mouse fell in, and a day later you pull the mouse out, and it's basically the whole mouse. You can't tell that there's anything missing from the mouse. And then the second time, the mouse falls in, and you can't. Not only can you not tell whether there's anything missing from the, not only can you tell that there's something missing from the mouse, but you're not able to pull anything out because it's all been chopped up. Maybe it went through a chopper machine or something as part of it getting into the thing in the first place, and you know that it went in because you saw the mouse at some point. So the point is that obviously you have to know that it's there, otherwise the question never comes up. So
I
okay.
was thinking that maybe the vinegar is so strong, almost like a toxic substance, it destroys
It could be. It could
the
absolutely
body of
be.
the mouse.
It could absolutely be. So we haven't really answered. So now Ravina Savar l'sheyure b'meya v'chad. Ravina says, well, maybe it's going to take 1 to 100. So even though ordinarily you would nullify taste at 60 to 1, in the case of a mouse, maybe it's going to take more than that. Amar lo gara mitruma, and he because he I'm sorry, Amar lo gara mitruma. because he says, look, it's not at least, it's certainly not worse than truma. So fine, truma, ditanan, truma ola be'echarumeya, that trula is 100 to 1, then it becomes batal. So Amarle Rav Tachlifa Bar Giza Ravina, Rav Tachlifa said back, well, Dilma Katablin Shel Truma B'Kedei Radami. Well, 1 second. If you're going to focus on truma and set and highlight that we're going to use a ratio that's related to the taste of truma, well, the taste of truma when it's spices, when you put in something that's really spicy, then delobatil taimahu, its flavor does not become nullified even at 100 to 1. Meaning you have to actually eliminate the taste. So Rav Achai, Shir B'chala B'chamshin. And Rav Achai says, no, you're going in the wrong direction. It actually should be only 50 as opposed to 60 because of the strength of the vinegar. As Rashi says, B'chamshin, Kevan Dechometz Tamo Kashet. Because the final line of the wide lines of Rashi on Samach Tet Aleph, because the vinegar is so strong, lo ba'ishisin, it doesn't need 60 libetule in order to nullify it. Dafilu b'chamshin lo yahev be'taima. Even at 50, there won't be any taste. So that is Rav Achai. Rav Shmuel Braid de Rav Ika Shi'er B'Shichra B'Shitin. He says, look, for beer, it's going to be 60. And we get the halacha, and the halacha is v'hilchasa idi v'idi b'shitin, that it doesn't make a difference which one you're talking about. 60 is the right amount. V'chein kol isurin shebetorah. When it comes to all prohibited substances in the Torah, it's going based on 60. As Rashi says, now this Rashi, I'll preface by noting that the halacha is not like this Rashi, but v'chein, even though Rashi obviously held this way, v'chein kol isur shebetorah b'shishim v'chein halacha Rav Chas b'Yisrael. That's in fact the halacha in all of Israel. Demin b'she'eno mino b'shishim. When you have one substance in a different substance, then what matters is 60. Aval, as the vav adds in the word aval, min b'mino b'mashahu. But when it comes to one substance in the same substance, well, then we follow mashahu. Even a very little bit will create a problem, and that's where we do not agree with this Rashi. Chutz michametz, and except for chametz, the afilu b'she'eno mino mukminan b'psachim hilchasa b'mashahu. That when it comes to Pesach, we're going to say that even that there it's going to be even a mashu kirav, as Rav says, ubechametz gzeira she'eno mino atomino. And the reason that when it comes to chametz on Pesach, we say that even min b'she'eno mino, we have to look at a mashahu. That's because we are concerned about min b'mino. Now, with all of that, it's worth noting that Rabbeinu Tam disagrees, and he says that all substances are permitted in shishim, and that's because in min b'shemin in min b'mino we generally say that rove biblically is sufficient, and we only say that rabbinically we require 60 to 1. So again, but Rashi is helping us understand the context here, and also offering us the conclusion that certainly when it comes to min b'she'eno mino, 60 is the relevant number. And so as a result, when the mouse is in the beer or the vinegar, you need 60 to 1 because we are concerned that somehow the mouse is going to provide a positive taste. Okay.
Where does halacha diverge from Rashi? Can you
So
clarify that?
Rashi says min b'mino b'mashahu, meaning that if there is any of one substance into the same substance that is prohibited. So, for example, you have a little bit of truma in truma wine in a big vat of truma wine. So then the entire vat, no matter what you have, is going to be all prohibited. And similarly, in connection with chametz. Charlie,
Yeah,
yes.
there's some other examples that it's not 60. One is if a mosquito falls into your soup and you don't remove the mosquito, you've eaten something that's prohibited because
Yeah,
it's
so
an
excellent point, right? I mean, we always are assuming a couple of different things. One is the removal of the actual item to the extent that you can see it. So, if you see the bug, you see the piece of meat that fell into a non-kosher meat that fell into the soup, you have to certainly remove it. So yes, that is certainly true. And there are other situations that we already noted that truma is an exception where we require 100 to 1. So there are certain situations where we have other different ratios.
So
so that
Rashi diverges from halakha regarding min b'mino or min be'eno mino.
Regarding min bimino, that we paskin min bimino also require shishim, and it's not always going to be prohibited.
the Orla and Kalayim are another example of where it's more than.
Exactly, where
Uh,
it's 200, I believe.
so the thing about chametz, I've heard people claim that New York City tap water is usher on Pesach because at some point in the past 170 years, some redneck has tossed a beer bottle into a reservoir.
That's pretty funny. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't actually thought through that issue. That's a interesting suggestion. All right. Okay, that brings us to our next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is going to deal with four different cases. Three of the cases we'll see are very, very similar. And we're going to ask in the Gemara, well, why did we need to teach all three of them? But let's go through them. A non-Jew is helping to carry the Jew's wine from one place to another. Mutter. As long as the wine is in a state of supervision, then it's all going to be permitted. Im hodio shehu maflig. If, on the other hand, the Jew tells the non-Jew that he's going to go away and he's going far away, kadesha yishtom v'yistom v'yigov. Well, then, as long as the non-Jew has sufficient time to make a hole, close up the hole, and to have the hole dry, well then the material in the new hole dry, well then that's going to be sufficient to be a problem. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says no, that's too short a time. You need to kadesh yiftach es a. It needs to be enough time, not just to bore a hole, because the hole would presumably be discoverable, as we will discuss in the Gemara. V'yaguf, but you have to open the container. V'yaguf, close the container, and vitigov, and then allow that new container to dry so that it all looks kosher v'yosher, and it looks like it was never touched. So as Rashi tells us, let's take a look at two Rashis on this Mishnah. Imhaya bechezkas hamishtamer. Mifarish beGemara, as we will explain in the Gemara, she'af al pisha hiflig Yisrael mina ovi kochavim, even though the Jew walked away, mil, like a thousand amos. So im lo hodiu shehu maflig, if he was not told that he's going to go so far away, mutter, the wine remains permitted. Demirtas ovid kochavim kol shaisa hashta asi, because at all points in time the non-Jew is concerned that the Jew is going to come back and catch him, and so as a result we need to be concerned about that. Shiu, and then we'll skip down the two Rashis. Shiuro b'kadesh yistom sheyishtom v'yistom v'yigov. So im shah kadei sheyikov ha'ovid kochavim nekev b'magufat hachavis, that if you wait a long enough time that the non-Jew can make a hole in the cover of the barrel, v'yachzor, and then go back the yistom hanekev and close up the hole, the tivash, and have it all dry, hastima asur, well then even your closed barrels would be considered prohibited as a result. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Eino ne'asar. No, it's not actually going to be prohibited. Ella ad sheyisha kedei sheyiftach as kol megufas halchavis. You have to have the time to open up the entire top of the barrel. V'efsher lenotla shelo tishaber kula, because it's not possible to take out without breaking the entire barrel. And meaning it's not possible to do it in a way that you won't be discovered, is the implication. Okay. And vitigov, that last word of tigov, means, take a look 2 Rashis down, vitivash, that it dries up. Aval listimas chor lo chashashu mishum deminkara. But when it comes to a making just a hole, that's not going to be sufficient, because you're going to be discoverable. It's going to be, you're going to catch, it'll be recognizable. And so as a result, that's why you don't need to, that's why that's not going to be sufficient. That amount of time is not going to be sufficient to cause a problem. And okay. All right. So that was case number 1. Case number 2, Hamayniach yeno bikaron o bisvina. If you're using wagons or a boat, v'halach lo b'kapandria, and then the owner goes a little bit away, nichnas lemedina v'rachatz mutar, and he goes into the city and he takes a bath, then the wine is still going to be permitted. And Rashi tells us, v'nichnas lemedina v'rachatz, b'merchatz, in the bathhouse, mutar, it's permitted. This is Rashi 3, from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi. It's about 17, 18 lines up. Nichnas lemedinas v'rachatz, b'merchatz, he washes himself in the bathhouse. Mutar, kevan de ovi kochavim, lo yada de shai mirtas v'lo naga. Because he doesn't know when he's going to come back, so he's going to be afraid and he's not going to touch it. So im hodiu shehu mafli, but of course, if the Jew tells the idolater that he's going away, kedei sheyistom v'yistom v'yigov. Well, then it's going to be sufficient as long as he has a time to make a hole. That's the Tanakama. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, again, he says, kedei sheyiftach as a chavis v'yagov v'yisigov. No, again, you have to remove the entire cover. If you don't remove the entire cover, it's not going to be enough time. Because if you move just a little bit, if you just make a hole, it'll be discoverable. So haminiach ovik, third case, haminiach ovik kuchavim bechanus. If you leave the non-Jew in your store, even though you're going in and you're going out, it's again permitted. However, if you tell him that you're going away and a long trip and going far away, well then kadesha yishtom v'yistom v'yigov. Again, all it takes is enough time, according to the Tanakama, to make a hole, fix the hole, and you're all good. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says no. Kadesha yiftach as a chavis v'yagov v'zigov. Again, you need to leave enough time for the person for the non-Jew to open the barrel completely and to replace the cover. And so again, the Gemara is going to explain why it needed to tell all 3 of these cases, despite the fact that essentially the machlokus is identical in all 3 cases. So haya ochel imo ala shulchan. If 4th case, which is completely unrelated, if they are eating together at a table, v'hiniach laginin ala shulchan v'lagin al hadul ki, and if you had left some flasks on the table and a flask in the cupboard, so v'anichu v'yatza, and you left him alone and you went out, well, masha al hashulchan asur. What's on the table is forbidden because he will presume that he'll be allowed to drink it. Sha'al hadolbaki mutar. But what's in the cupboard is going to be permitted because you did not tell him that you could take in whatever you want. And so as a result, he's going to be concerned that it's going to look like a thief if he goes into the cupboard. V'im amarlo have mozeg v'shose. But if you were to tell him on your way out that, oh, listen, go whatever, pour and drink whatever you need. Well, then even what's in the cupboard is going to be forbidden because he's going to say, you told me to get in something to drink. And chavios pesuchos asuros. And any kind of open barrels will be prohibited. Stumos mutaros. But the closed barrels will be permitted. but in one condition, as long as you come back within the amount of time that it would take to open the barrel, apply a new cover, and have that cover dry. So, and so here it's interesting because the Mishnah does not tell us of a machlokes. It only essentially gives us the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and we are going to use that later as we discuss this Mishnah to say that this shows that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. And let's take a look at the last Rashi on the Mishnah, stumos butaros, that the closed barrels are going to mutter. Ad sheyisha sheyiftach v'yigov v'yigov. So that again, as long as you do not wait or come back within the time that it takes to open and replace the cover. The stama Rabbi Shimon, and this is a stam Mishnah. This piece of the Mishnah is a stam Mishnah like Rabbi Shimon. Midolo Kitani Sheyistom, because it didn't actually reference the making of the hole. And again, as I noted, we will reference that shortly in the Gemara. So, Hechi Dami Becheskas Hamishtamer. What does it mean? Because we said at the very beginning of this Mishnah that Ovid Kochav Shahaya Mavir Im Yisrael Kade Yayin Mimakom Lumakom Im Haya Becheskas Hamishtamer, that if he was in the state of supervision. So what did that mean by in the state of supervision? Kedetanya. Well, it's like the following brisa. Haresha Hayu Chamarav Ufo Alav Teunin Taharos. If you hire somebody to carry or donkey drivers to carry, donkey drivers or other workers to carry your tahor things from one place to another, afilu hiflig mehen yoter mimil, even if you separated yourself by more than a meal. And by the way, this answers the question. Remember a couple of days ago, Ken, you noted the fact that Rashi had this odd language of afilu yoter mimil, even if it was more than a meal. And we were like, well, I don't understand. Where is that coming from? It should be that it's only if it's less than a meal. That's from this brisa. That this brisa highlights the fact that even if you're a little bit more than a meal, it's not saying that it's forever, but the point is that even if you're more than a meal, taharos taharosav taharos, your tahor items remain tahor. V'im amar lahen l'chu v'ani ba'acharechem. However, if on the other hand, instead of distancing yourself without saying something, you distance yourself by saying, listen, you guys go ahead, I'm going to catch up. So, Kevan, and I'm going to come later. Kevan shenis alma eno mehem taharosav tmeos. As soon as they become hidden from view, you need to be worried about them becoming tamei. So, ma'ishna resha u'ma'ishna seifa. Why the difference between the beginning and the last? Amar Rav Yitzchak, resha b'mitaher chamarav ufo alav l'kach. Well, it must be that in the beginning, the employer had purified the workers so that they had all gone to the mikvah, and so they were tahor at the time. And so as a result, that's why even if you separate a little bit from them, they are not going to make anything tameh. Well, ihachi seifa nami, but then in that last case, also, why don't we say that they're tahor? After all, you purified them, and we're going to be talking about the same case. Well, ein am haaretz makbid al mago chavero. No, in the first case, because he doesn't know when you're coming back, he's not going to allow anybody else to touch it. But in the second case, he could allow his friend to come and touch it because he'll think, listen, he made me tahor, but that was just to be strict. But really, I think that everybody is tahor. And so as a result, if my friend comes and touches it, I won't stop him. Well, ihachi afilu reisha nami neimahachi. Well, one second, even in the first case where why not let him do it? So Rava clarifies as we turn to Samach Tedem Abet, but biva lahem derech akalason. No, the point is that we're worried that the employer is going to come back from a different direction. So as Rashi tells us, Kishibal Habayas, Yochol Lavo, Derech Akalason, he could come back via some other route going around. Demirtas Hashta Asi. So there always is concern that he's going to come right now. And so as a result, in the first case, where it's the the guy doesn't necessarily have to follow in the same location, same way. So then he's going to be worried that the guy's going to catch up at any moment. But in the second case where he says, I'm going to follow you, well, then all he has to worry about is one direction. And he can see if the guy's not visible, well, then he's not going to, there's nothing for him to worry about. And so as a result, he won't have any problem letting his friend touch the produce. So ihaki seifa nami. Well, once again, if the guy could come back from some other way in a different direction, why do we say that in the last case it's going to be tameh? Well, when you say that you're going to come and follow later, well, then they have some smichas das. They have some relaxed attitude about it, and therefore they don't need to worry about you coming at that moment. So, okay, so we've basically explained that
they don't know when he's coming. He could come in 10 seconds. If he
no, but they know because the guy said, I'm going to follow you. So then as a result, they're not concerned that he's going to necessarily catch up to them. So as a result, that's why if he says, I'm going to follow, so then yes, you're right that who knows when he's going to catch up, but there's a basic direction that's associated with it. He's not likely to be there right away. Right away, you'll be able to do something with it or let your friend touch it. But when it comes to no warning, well, then if you haven't given him any warning, so then the guy can literally come at any moment. So that's the difference between the two. Meaning the point is that when you say, I'm going to follow you later, right away, he's not going to follow that moment because, later suggests after some amount of time. Okay, so now we go back and we address why we needed all three of the cases that seem to have the exact machlokas. Now,
what is the goal of these of the kachavim? They want to trick him. They want to get the produce. I mean, you say right away or not right away. So, I mean, do they have a
excellent question.
That they want the wine, they want to make it tummy, they want the hachis. What is the
no? So you're excellent point that we are not assuming that it's lahachis, but rather the question is do they have the opportunity to do it? And if they have the opportunity, so then we are going to be concerned about it. If there's unless there's a reason for them not to do it. So essentially the question is sort of what's the baseline? And it seems that the baseline is we are going to be concerned unless there's a reason not to be concerned. And here, again, you're right. We're not concerned that the guy is going to make himself tameh and then touch the produce. We're worried that he's going to allow his friend to touch the produce because he's, he has no, he doesn't feel like there's anything special that he needs to worry about. And so as a result, because he's an Amaretz, he doesn't understand the general rules. And so that he's now that he can touch it, that doesn't mean that anybody else can touch it. And so now we're going to get to the three cases in the Mishnah that have the same basic structure. The two dots here, we're at the two dots on the third line on Samach Tedron Bet, have it in reverse order. They first have the store case and then it references the wagon and boat case because that's not the order of our Mishnah. If you take a look at the Hagos Habach, he reorders it and puts it in the same order as our Mishnah. So he says, Hameniach yeno bekaron obesfina and hameniach ovid kochavim bechanuso. And so utsricha. All three of these cases, the first case was when they're all traveling together. The second case is the wagon or boat. And the third case is the store. We need all three. And we're going to see that this is a lozu afzu situation. That not only in this case, but in this case. To eat Tana Ovikochavim, because if I just taught the first case, to suffer Dilma Asi Chavachazile, when the person's going to come back, the Jew's going to come back at any moment. So as a result, that's why we're going to allow the wine to be consumed even after the non-Jew was alone with it. But when he's on a wagon or a boat, maybe he's going to be able to move the boat or move the wagon away. And so as a result, he's not going to be as visible. And as a result, that's why we add that even the halacha, the machlokas, applies even in that case. And as long as you get back within a certain amount of time, he's going to be afraid that he's going to get caught. V'itana b'karno b'svina. And if you say that it's that in a wagon or a boat, well, mishum desavar dilma asi beorcha achriti. Maybe he's going to come back in a different way, and he's going to, I need to be worried that he's going to come from this direction or from that direction, and so as a result, there's more of a concern about it. But the koi aguda because or he's going to not necessarily even come back on a different route. He'll just stand on a wall and look at me, and so he'll see me from a distance. But when he's in his store, so then ema achid la levava. Maybe he's gonna say that he can lock the door, va'avid kol debai, and do whatever he wants. So Kamash Malan, because the guy is going to come back and he'll catch him with the door locked. So as a result, we're going to say that even in that situation, as long as you haven't gone away for too long, you are going to, and haven't told him that you're going to be away. So then it will be okay and the wine will be kosher. Okay, so our Mishnah discussed, again, it had the machlokas between the Tanakama, who says all that you need is the amount of time for a hole, as opposed to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says you need to remove the entire lid. So, Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, machlokas b'shel sid. The machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is when you use plaster. Aval b'shel tit, if you're using clay, divrei hakol kadesh yivtach vayagov v'yigov. Then everybody agrees that you need to have enough time to remove the entire lid, put on a new lid, and have that lid dry. And Rashi explains to us the reason for this in two Rashis. So we'll take a look first, 3 lines down in the third widest line, third of the wide lines at the top of Rashi. Machlokas b'shel sid, b'magufa shel sid. If the lid of the barrel is made of plaster, shehi levana, which is white, hu dechaishi rabbanan lishasuma. That's where the rabbis are concerned about making a hole. Dekevan delavanhu, because it's white, all white. Lo minkar bein chadash liyashan. You can't tell the difference between the new part and the old part. And so as a result, when the hole gets plugged up with new plaster, it very quickly dries to the same color as the old plaster. Aval shel tit, continuing on in Rashi, second of the narrow lines in Rashi, if you make it out of clay, shehu shachor b'tchilaso, it starts out black. V'afal pi shehu nagov, and even though it's now dry, eino milavin, it is not white. Ad yom o yomayim, it's going to take a day or two for it to dry to that degree to become a lighter color. So as a result, divrei hakol lo chayshin l'shesuma deminka rosh yasimas haskor, because it will be obvious that this part of the lid has been replaced, and so as a result, keshara magufa, because it's not like the rest of the lid. Ve'eno asar, and so as a result, ve'eno asar achi yisha kedei sheyivtach v'yigov v'magufa chadasha v'tingov. And so as a result, it needs to be a long enough time that you can replace the entire lid, because then you can't compare and see that part of it is old. And when you don't have the old version with you, this is not in the Rashi, but this is me saying, if you don't have the old one with you, maybe you'll recognize if if the color's very significantly different. But given the fact that it's a uniform color, you won't necessarily know that the entire lid has been replaced. Okay, so Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. The Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said to the Chachamim, you want to say, Rabba bar bar Chana, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that the machlokes is only where they did it out of plaster and not where they did it out of clay. But what about the following brisa that is a continuation of the discussion between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim in our Mishnah? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says to the Chachamim, "Valo stuma nikar bein milamala bein milamata." How can you guys possibly say that it is okay to just give enough time to make a hole and clean and to fix the hole? That will be recognizable both from above and below. So now, amra bishlama bishel tit machlokas. Now, if you say that the machlokas was in connection with clay, hainu katani stumo nikar ben bilamala ben bilamata. That's why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that the patch is going to be recognizable both above and below. Ela amra bishel sid machlokas. But if you're telling me that the machlokas is specifically only in connection with plaster, I understand how it will be recognizable that you fix the hole if you take the lid off and you look at the lid from the bottom. But when you have the lid from the top, it's all white, it's all plaster. It won't be recognizable. So isn't that a proof that Rabbi Bar Chana is not correct and Rabbi Yochanan is not correct in explaining the machlokas in our Mishnah? No, not necessarily. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who delo yada my kamri rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel wasn't sure what the rabbi's case was discussing. V'hachi kamrlu, and this is what he was telling them. So if you're telling me that your position is in connection with clay, well, stumo nikar bein milamala bein milamata. Well, then if you're just making the whole patch, then it's going to be recognizable both from above and from below. The ibishal sid kamrisu. But if, on the other hand, you're talking about plaster, sure, you can't tell that there's anything been changed from above, but milamata miya yadia, you can tell that there's a change from the bottom. And I think Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel that is speaking. I think that that's enough, and therefore it's not enough to have a patch. If a Rabbanan and the rabbis say back, no, once it's not recognizable that anything has been changed from above, so then the Jew's not going to think to turn it over. Everything looks copacetic, and so as a result, he'll assume that it's all fine, and therefore it's going to be a problem, even if they have enough time, even if the non-Jew has enough time to make just the hole and to fix the hole. Inami zimnin dechalin, or alternatively, you could say even in when you use plaster with a hole, sometimes, not often, but sometimes the lid will it'll turn out that the bottom side of the lid matches also, and so as a result you won't actually be able to tell that anything has happened for that hole. So Amarava halacha karabban Shimon ben Gamliel hoel utnan stomach kavase, that since the end of our Mishnah ends up being is a stam Mishnah and is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that shows that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. As it says, ditnan, as we say in our Mishnah, haya ochel al hashulchan imo, if they're eating together at a table, v'haniach lagin al shulchan lagin al hadulbaki, and he leaves a flask on the table and a flask in the cupboard, v'hiniach v'yatza, and he leaves them and he goes out. Masha al hashulchan asor, masha al hadulbaki mutar. What's in the table is prohibited. What's in the cupboard is permitted. The im amarlo have mezog v'shoseh, and if he says, listen, drink whatever you need, well then sha'al hadulbaki asor, even what's in the closet is going to be on the shelf is going to be prohibited. Chavias pesuchos asuros, and any open barrel will be forbidden. Stumos mutaros, but a closed barrel will be mutter as long as kadesh yiftach vayugav v'sigov, as long as he comes back within the time that it takes to open, apply a new cover, and have that cover dry. Well, pshita, it's obvious. You've just highlighted the fact that the end of our Mishnah is a stam Mishnah like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So doesn't that show? Of course it shows that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Why would I think that it wouldn't? In fact, why did Rabban even need to tell us this? So ma'odatema kula Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel katani like. No, I might have thought that if we look at the end of that Mishnah and where it says at the end of the Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Kadesh Yittach as a Chavis v'Yigov v'Tigov, and then it actually has two dots in our Mishnah. Then maybe what comes follows is also Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's statement, and so maybe that is not actually a Stam Mishnah. Kamash Malan. So that's what Rabbi is telling us. Yes, don't think that this is just a continuation of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel talking, but rather it is a separate Mishnah, and therefore, as a separate Mishnah, it can tell us that the halacha is in fact like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel.
So what does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel hold regarding the tit versus the sid?
That doesn't make a difference. Whatever it is, you're always going to need to replace you have to, as long as you come back in enough time that the non-Jew could not have replaced the lid, the entire lid, it's going to be okay.
Even if even that, though we make the distinction between sid and tit, that one
even though we make that distinction. In fact, he uses that distinction to convince the rabbis that, you know what, the rabbis should only allow a hole to be permitted in the sid case, in the plaster case, because only then is everything looking okay from the outside. It might not look okay from the inside, but from the outside, everything looks okay. And so that's why the rabbis say that when it comes to plaster, even enough time for a hole is sufficient. But Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no, because even the plaster will look different from the bottom as a result, and generally look different from the bottom. As a result, even a hole, even for plaster, is not a sufficient amount of time. You have to leave enough time to replace the entire lid. So back into the Gemara, we are, just to put us as to exactly where we're located, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up in the narrow line, second to last word on the line. Now, once we said we're not considered about a hole, making a hole in the lid, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Well, we also have a separate halacha. The hilchas of kavase to Rabbi Eliezer. We also know that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. Delo chayesh l'ziyufa. That in general we are not concerned about forgery, meaning we're not concerned that somebody is going to basically use a piece of artwork to replace, and make a new thing that's exactly like the old thing, in order to try and engage in forgery. Ha'idna, my taima, lomos vinan, chamra biyad ovde kuchavim. Well, now that we essentially said, effectively, we're not going to worry about a hole, and we're not going to worry about replacing the entire lid, because that would be effectively a forgery. So why are we now not giving our wine to idol worshippers to look over it? So let's take a look at Rashi, who helps us understand this question better. V'hashta, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi, Samach Terem Bet. V'hashta to Kavina and Hilchas of the Rabban Shimon, the Delo Chayash L'Shasuma, L'Nekivas Chor, to making a hole, Shehu below Torah, Mishum Deminkar, that even though that doesn't require any work, but it's going to be recognizable. So therefore, we're not going to be worried about it. Ula petichas chavis, but kula nami. And when it comes to the opening of the entire barrel, we're also not going to be worried. Dechayish lab Rabban Shimon. Now, Rabban Shimon was worried about that. But lo kaimalan kavase. But we actually don't hold like Rabbi Shimon's concern in that regard. Dahai ziyufa detirchahu, because at the end of the day, that's a major forgery that is required in order to replace the entire lid. V'anan kavinan, and we concluded, b'ain mamidin, in the parak ain mamidin, back on Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph, halacha Rabbi Eliezer, that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, delo chayesh l'ziyufi, that we don't worry about a forgery, dechosem echad, of a one signature on a closer. Ha'idna today. Amai, so as a result, amai lomos vinan chavios stumos biyad ovde kochavim. So why don't we let our non-Jewish neighbors watch over our wine? So the answer is Mishum Shaika, because of the air hole. So Rashi explains, Nakav dak, a very small hole, dakav ma'od, a very small hole, shehu b'megufas chavis, that is in the lid of the barrel, l'yos reach hayayin yotze, so that the air, the smell of the wine can go out. V'yesh lachush shema yiktach sham. That maybe he'll stick a straw in there, b'miktsas, v'yitom min hayayin, and he'll taste some of the wine. So essentially, because it's, if in fact we did give them a completely closed and sealed bottle, well, then we do not need to be worried about it. And this is, again, this is the basis that we can have, a kosher wine store can have non-kosher, non-Jewish employees, and they can get you a bottle of wine because the wine is completely closed and sealed. And so as a result, that's the because we don't have, if you don't have the air hole, then in fact we don't have to worry about it. But in general, because of the air holes, that's why we're not going to do it more generally. Okay, let's do one last little bit. Amarava, Zona Ovedes Kochavim. This is related to the story about eating together. So Rava says that if you have a non-Jewish prostitute, the Yisrael Mesubenetzla, and there are some Jews that are spending time with her. That, not that they should be, but they are. Chamra Shari. The wine that is in that area is permitted, meaning that even though the Nehid Takiv Lahu Yatz, yeah, they were overcome by the power of the desire to have relations with her. But Yatsra de Yayin Nesach lo takiv lo. But they'll still be careful about Yayin Nesach. They're not going to let her touch the wine. On the other hand, Zona Yisraelis ve'ovdei kochavim musubin. If you, on the other hand, the prostitute is Jewish and there are idolaters with her, chamra asur. Well, then the wine is going to be prohibited. My taima, why? Hoel vizila alayu, because she's cheap in their eyes. Basrayu garira. So then she'll do whatever they want. So as a result, they will not be concerned about taking the wine and pouring it. And so as a result, that's going to be problematic. Basically, this highlights that power structures matter in terms of whether or not we are going to be concerned about a non-Jew touching wine. And so if the non-Jew is your employee, then you have greater control over the situation. But if you're the employee, then then you do not. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to tell us 11 stories, but for that discussion, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
In the first case, Steinsaltz uses the term zona goya.
Yes, okay, interesting. As
Yeah,
opposed
that
to Avodah Kochavim. Interesting. I don't know whether
that
let's
was
see if there's a, yeah.
uncensoring.
Yeah, and that probably could very well be. I mean, obviously, the censor's got a lot of places, but that could very well be. No, there's no note in the Gemara here as to whether or not there's a changed language. But as we know, that a lot of places where it says Ovid Kochavim, it could actually mean goy, and in fact we generally understand it often as meaning goy.
Yeah.
To which
Dr.
then
Shaw.
we hold, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, that there has to be sufficient zman that for the Ovid Kochavim of the Kochavim to Ovid to open, to close, to seal, that the cork has to dry and so forth. Right.
It seems like, even though we paskin like him, the paskening like him is actually just, we're not worried about a little hole, and that because the concern would be is, are we worried about a small opportunity to do to take the wine where it's easy to do, but also easy to be caught. And we paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that we do not worry about that situation where it's easy to catch and easy to do and easy to be caught. So then the question is, well, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says if you give him enough time, even if it's hard to do, we're going to be worried. And that is where Rebbe Eliezer comes in and says, if it's hard to do, we're also not going to be concerned. And so as a result, even though it seems like from our Mishnah that we should be concerned about if there's enough time to replace the entire cover, because that is such a major project to do, the Gemara ends up concluding that we're not actually worried about that either. And it's only because there's a hole in the lid that we actually say that we don't put our barrels with non-Jews. But when there's no hole in the lid, and of course that would be or therefore be most cases of wine bottles today, so then as a result, there's not going to be a concern to leave it with a non-Jew.
But so
It-
we're not concerned about a time factor then at all?
Yeah, that's what it seems. That's what it seems like that we end up concluding that because it's such a major undoing. Now, again, I don't want to pass this and that, but that's the way the Gemara seems to come out. That we're not even concerned about a major time factor at all.
It's interesting. We're still concerned about this with wine because for the last 1500s, 1200 years, Jews have lived in societies where nobody is pouring wine libations.
100%, 100%. It is definitely, and that obviously that prohibition is the rabbinic version of the prohibition, and you're absolutely right that notwithstanding all that, we continue to have the rabbinic prohibition.
So the whole
Catholic
point of this, the sit and the what do you call it, the tit is almost irrelevant then. It doesn't matter how much time.
Correct, exactly. In the end, it seems like that you're exactly right that it doesn't make a difference.
A Catholic priest is going to do everything he can to prevent a non-Catholic from having anything to do with a consecrated wine.
Yeah.
And for Protestants, there's absolutely no significance to the use of the wine or grape juice in the service. It's just a prop and a play.
Yeah, so 100%. Well,
Oh.
that is why there was a Tosos that we saw earlier in the Maseches that highlights, I think actually even the very beginning, that highlights that there are reasons to be a little bit more lenient. And so as a result, in certain situations, we can be a little bit more lenient because you're exactly right that there isn't really the concern of libations today. All right. Got to go, but have a wonderful day and look forward to continuing our learning tomorrow. Again, I've got all of this week because Dove's away and looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great day.